Hello and welcome to West Virginia Ed Talks, and this is part of our training series, WV 101 training. So this is our second one that we've done. I get to come to you today as a training facilitator. Normally I'm just listening to people conversate about their issues from the community, but LSICs, Local School Improvement Councils, are my jam, so I'm very excited to present this to you. I will tell you that I normally present to people in person, and I don't use PowerPoints. It's just me and a big Post-it note, and we go through the training, so this is a little different for me, so be patient, bear with me. We are also, I wanted to let you know, I'm going to actually rebroadcast this twice live. That way you will have the opportunity to ask questions as we go through the training. You can just comment under the post, and I'll try to answer you as I see your questions. If you watch this as a rebroadcast, you can also post, and I'll pay attention and look at the questions and make sure I answer those as well. So we are going to get started. So local school improvement councils, right? Hold on a second. Let me pull this up. All right. So our agenda, we always have to have an agenda, and that's how LSICs are ran too, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But our agenda and our goals today are we're going to talk about the hierarchy of West Virginia public education. What does that look like? Who makes the policies and the decisions, and who kind of enforces that, right? We're also going to learn about the LSIC policy itself, LSIC best practices, and maybe a little bit, if we have time, on communication skills and family engagement, and some strategies for your LSIC where you are located in your county. A lot of people don't know what the LSIC is, the Local School Improvement Council. So sometimes I refer to it as the Lost Secret Information Club. It plays a very key role in the school, or is supposed to. It's been around for about 20 years, I believe. But, you know, where there's been so many changes with superintendents, with staff, with county level staff, and so on, it's kind of got lost in translation. There's been a few legislation changes that have happened, but I think for the most part, this policy, which was mandated by legislation in Code 18, was kind of on its own in West Virginia Department of Ed policy. So not a lot of people knew where to find it. Number one, and not a lot of people actually did trainings on it to even let their LSIC members, their new ones coming in, understand what the LSIC was. So a little background for me, about 10 years ago or so, my daughter's elementary school principal came to me and said, "Hey, Jenny, you know, I want you to be a part of this LSIC, this Local School Improvement Council, and we're going to make a wish list, and we're going to take it to the county board." And I'm in Caldwell County, and so that was really the full extent of it. We had one meeting, and there were teachers, you know, present and staff, but I did not myself understand the concept or the whole policy for LSIC. So I kind of did a lot of this research myself and formed a partnership with West Virginia Department of Education. So over the last couple of years, I've worked with them. Clayton Birch has been, you know, amazing, you know, letting me come in and talk to his department heads and kind of talked about, you know, what it was and how we can improve it. So we're going to get into that too. I did some trainings last fall, some in-person trainings. I was able to reach about 24 counties. And a lot of the feedback at the time, and I'm sure if you're involved with an LSIC, you would probably agree with some of these comments, but a lot of the feedback was, you know, the county LSIC meeting is typically a dog and pony show. You know, it's typically principals kind of leading the conversation, kind of giving a presentation of what's going on. But there's not a lot of dialogue between the LSICs and the county school board members. Administration, as chairs or two helpers or officers, a lot of times you would see assistant principals in that role, and the principal wasn't really involved, which, you know, and we'll get to that about the role of the principal, the school principal. They are to be an ambassador of these LSICs. So that was kind of an unfortunate thing. the parent election section. So there was a lot of confusion in the language. I think originally legislation intended that the parent groups that were already at schools would be in charge of the election. And that was because that was a broader way to reach parents in the community. It was not to exclude anyone that was not a PT or PTA member. And we're going to get to that too. There was almost no communication and outreach for LSICs is something I very commonly heard throughout those 24 counties. So you may not have heard anything on the county level except for that one county meeting. There was not any outreach to parents to encourage them to come to LSIC meetings, although they were public, and we'll get to that too. But that's something that we can all work on with our county and with our schools. And again, like I said before, there was no training really going on. Things tended to get watered down. The Department of Ed would maybe give a training or a recap of LSICs or encourage people to, make them efficient. But there wasn't any direct training. And that is something that is in policy that we'll get to, that, a kind of a little training is supposed to happen to let your members know what the LSIC is and what their role is. And then, last, I'm going to remind you all through this, if you want any more information, more detailed information, you want support or help trying to get your LSIC up and running more effectively, you can always reach out to me. And I'm going to put my information up here in a little bit. So first, before we dive into LSIC policy itself, I wanted everybody, I do this with my in-person trainings, we need to get a full understanding of why they're important, and that is a look at the hierarchy of the West Virginia public education itself. So again, who is running the show? Who are the people making policies all the way from federal to the actual school level? So we're going to dive into that. There's my contact information. You can go on and write it down. I'm going to post it in this training as well in the comments. But that is who I am. I am Jenny Anderson. I work for Our Future West Virginia, which is an organization. We build community leaders, and we all have our little platforms and pockets that we kind of are our specialties, and mine happens to be public education. So I focus on getting parents in particular, and sometimes students and community, whoever, but focusing on parents to get them more engaged in public schools and help them navigate around policy issues and all sorts of those things, and give them really good resources. All right, so the hierarchy of public education. This is a big topic, right? Big thing. Have you ever wondered who's in charge, or have you ever gotten frustrated because you don't know who's in charge? So I'm going to, part of this training, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to ask questions, and if anyone's watching out there and wants to respond, I'll see your comments and answers. But if there's anyone out there watching right now and they want to answer, what is the very top of public education? Who makes those policies? So when you think about that, we're talking about federal. And then thinking about, because I'm going to ask you in the next few slides, state level, who's in charge, who makes those policies, who's boss, right? Who's really in charge? So we're going to look at the state level. We're also going to look at the county level. So how is that operating? Who is making those decisions and approving those policies? And then we're also going to look at the school level, which is kind of obvious who's in charge of a school and who's making those decisions, but it is a group effort, or it should be, and we're going to talk a little bit about that too. On the federal level, so my first question is, does anyone out there actually know who makes the federal public education policies? I don't see a lot of people out there right now, so I'm going to go on and answer. So it looks kind of like this. So you have at the top, of course, the President of the United States. He has veto power, he or she. And so regardless of what comes underneath, they, sometimes, depending on the makeup, have that power to kind of approve or not approve an education budget. But we do have a Secretary of Education Currently, it is Betsy DeVos, and then she has a cabinet team that works with her. And then, of course, Senate and Congress, they play a key role. They discuss these budgets and these issues regarding public education and have a lot of power to approve or make people go back and amend policies, or they can amend policies, right? So, so you have, of course, the president, you have the Secretary of Education, you have Senate and Congress all working together on the federal level to create what our budget looks like. So how does that work, and who else is involved? Like almost like subcommittees. So you have things that are decided on the federal level that affect everything from federal all the way down to the school level. You would have things like the USDA food program, right? So how we feed kids while they're at school or after school, or how they feed kids through like summer feeding. So that's all under USDA. So talking about how that funding happens and what's happening right now, I would be remiss if I wouldn't mention that the census, the 10-year census, is going on. So that plays a key role in how a lot of this funding that comes to our state is decided. So even though we get money no matter what every year, the 10-year census is really what determines the estimates for what our state gets for the next 10 years. So that's why it's really, really important. Even though we're going through COVID-19 and it kind of like puts a damper on things, but we really, really need everybody to fill out that census. It's somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 per person that comes into our state for a lot of these programs. And it's not just public education, but that's what we're going to focus on today. So some of the other funding that comes through public education federal funds is Title I, as well as other title funding. Like I said, after school programming, things like Energy Express, which is really big in our state, that keeps kids busy in the summer. It feeds them, really important thing. It feeds them during the summer. A lot of them, I think most of them, are actually going to be still operating, just in a different way this year. A lot will be virtual, but they will still be like feeding kids and that sort of thing. And that's, some federal funding comes to them for that. IDEA, so that's the Individuals with Disabilities Act. So that affects kids that, and parents that have children and students that have IEPs. So there's a lot of funding that comes to our state for that. And some of the things we've been hearing through COVID-19 is there's a lot of regulations that have been lifted, and some budget cuts, and and this is not the time to do that. I'm not going to get political, but it's kind of scary for parents that their child has an IEP, because one of the things that's a worry through this remote digital learning has been, will my child start regressing because they may not have some of the physical services that they would have normally that the public schools are required to give those students. So it's, we're trying to keep an eye on that. And hopefully what will happen is some of those things that have been cut on the federal level, some of the counties, as they're getting CARE Act funds and stimulus funds, they can kind of like fill in those cracks, especially if you're talking Title I schools and IDEA things to be compliant. There's career and technology funds and grants that come from the federal level. So if you're a CTE fan like I am, they get some funding through that. So that's super important. Higher education grants. If you had children going out, off to college, our state gets a lot of higher education grants and funding from federally funded money. And then a lot of what determines this. So the process that determines this, and I mentioned the census before, but each state, because it's a federal mandate, you may have heard the term No Child Left Behind in the past, but now we have a new system and new guidelines called ESSA, and that is Every Student Succeeds Act. So that kind of took the place of No Child Left Behind. There were deficits in that way of thinking, and it just didn't work out. So new administration came up with this new plan, ESSA. So every state has to come up with their own ESSA plan. that determines how they're going to spend the funds, what their system is going to kind of look like, and how they're going to really reach at-risk students, and thinking about homeless students and transitional students, students with disability. It's the whole gambit. This is kind of like their plan. So our state has local school improvement councils listed as part of their ESSA plan because, like I said, it's mandated by legislation to be in place in every school, every public school. So that is part of their ESSA plan. I'll mention census again. Make sure you fill out your census. I did mine a while back, and it was, I think it may have taken me 10 minutes to fill out, but it's very important because all of these funds that I'm talking about now, really, that's determined by the census count. So you really want to make sure that you get counted. And then the big thing on the federal level is Betsy DeVos and her crew make up the federal education budget. So, thinking about the last couple years in legislation where charter schools came into play, and even like the possibility of waivers for, kids to get, families to get a little bit of money to homeschool their kids and things like that. That was all like the brainchild of the, part of this federal education budget. And Betsy DeVos, who was throwing funds into our state, she was trying to throw funds to open up things like charter schools. So those are things, the budget is huge. I don't think it's something you want to read as part of your summer reading because it's yay thick. But that is how it's made. This is kind of the system on the federal level. So if you have any questions, like I said, you can type them in here. I'm trying to watch my personal page as well as the West Virginia Ed Talks page. It's best to put the questions on the West Virginia Ed Talk page because I see them live and I can answer it right away. So we're going to move on to the state level, right? The fun level. So who's in charge of the state education, public education? Again, don't see any questions, so I'm just going to keep moving on. So, of course, the governor has a lot of power with public education. And why is that and how is that? Well, when they are elected governor, they get to appoint a lot of offices, right? So, and one of those being, and then, of course, legislation works with the governor as policies are developed and made or funding is spent. But the governor, back to appointments, he gets to appoint our state board of education. So it works a little different on the state level than it works on the county level, and we'll get into that next. But the governor appoints. The legislation, of course, makes up the policies, the state code and policies. And the governor, of course, just like the president of the United States, has power to veto in certain situations. I'm not going to go into that because we're not going to learn too much about policy except for LSIC today. But I can do a policy workshop on that and teach you all about policy. But for today's purposes, we're going to talk about public education. And, we've seen a lot of changes in legislation over the past, couple sessions. We've seen teacher strikes because they were fighting for public schools. They were fighting for, better pay and respect more than anything, because that is something in our state that just seems to be a trend. It's like teachers aren't necessarily well respected by certain people. Not all legislation, but some. But going back to the West Virginia Board of Education. So that is, the governor gets to appoint, not elect, appoint 9 members. Those 9 members are voting members, and then they have a term of 9 years, and it's staggered. So there's not all of them are coming in and coming out at the same time. It's a pretty long period that they can serve. There are 11 West Virginia Board of Education members total. And we're going to get into who those extra members are. They are ex officio members. They do have a vote. They are, entitled to a vote. Actually, I said 3. There's 2 extra members. There can be 3, but right now there's 2. So you have the 5 appointed by the governor, or 5. actually 9, that's typo, by the governor. And then you have 2 currently that are ex officio, and that is the state superintendent and the chancellor of higher education. So, in essence, the West Virginia Board of Education, and this process is actually going on now because Dr. Payne had stepped down in, I think, February. The Board of Education has accepted applications for a new superintendent because they will be hiring the new superintendent of schools. Right now, Clayton Birch is serving as an interim superintendent. Because of COVID-19 and the chaos, they did extend the hiring process. So they will be actually, I believe, on June 4th, looking or doing interviews for state superintendent. And we may be keeping Clayton Birch as our state superintendent. He was actually hired by Dr. Payne years ago and worked, in tandem with him, and has seen a lot of these changes and a lot of things that have changed. And we're going to get into that accountability policy because that's for LSIC. Is a lot of those things right now probably should kind of remain stable, especially now since we're going through this pandemic and trying to not make too many changes in the structure. So, but anyway, so the West Virginia Board of Education hires our state superintendent. So they're kind of the boss of the state superintendent. And then under the state superintendent, you have the West Virginia Department of Ed. And that is who the West Virginia Department of Ed is actually who employs the state superintendent. He or she has associate superintendents. They're in charge of different aspects of things. Clayton Birch used to be the policy guru and had always been very helpful and accessible when I would have crazy questions about things like LSIC policy, and helped get me in to talk to certain people, which was very, I appreciated a lot. So the next thing you have are West Virginia Department of Ed head department heads or coordinators. And so all of these people, all right, so under the Department of Ed, they're the ones that actually they'll take the state code that's made, and they will make their own policy under Department of Ed as to what schools and counties are supposed to follow. Sometimes they can tweak a policy that's already existing without legislation if they feel there's a need for that. They get feedback from internal and external stakeholders on all of these policies. So if you're ever interested, you can always contact the superintendent's office and say, hey, I'm interested in being a stakeholder if you know one of those policies is coming up. But it's, and that's done in several ways. And again, I'm not going to go into policy structure or anything like that, but I do know that they do listen to the stakeholders and get feedback, whether a policy is relevant to teachers and instruction in the classroom, or maybe it's something like LSIC where it's going to involve family engagement and things like that. So I was for myself, I was able to become an internal or an external stakeholder for the new LSIC policy. So they also, the superintendent's office has to report to LOCIA, which is Legislation Oversight Committee Education Accountability. That's a mouthful. So they have to report on things like discipline. They have to report on waivers that might come through an LSIC, which we will get to in a little bit. They report on really all aspects. The department heads are usually the ones that kind of go over across the way to the building and report. If it's child nutrition, you'll have that department head going and reporting. So it just depends. But they all make reports, and sometimes legislation will request a report that hasn't been given or hasn't been thought of. So maybe like last year, we heard a lot about, how many kids were being pulled out because of and homeschooled, or how many homeless kids are in our school system, or how many grandparents are raising, or kinship relationships or families are out there. So they may have asked for a report. The Education Committee or LOCIA could have asked for a report on that. So This is the thing. This is the thing that a lot of people don't know, and this kind of trickles down from the state or from the federal to the county or the school level. Um, so the state policy can look at a federal policy, and they can actually make it stronger than what is mandated by federal legislation. So for an example, a personal experience I have was I worked on the nutrition. I was a nutrition advisory council member, and our state nutrition policy was being revamped. And there were a few things in there that we wanted for our state that it wasn't something that federally was mandated, but we really felt it was important for our state. And one of those things was lunch shaming. So, you hear that term a lot outside of West Virginia, especially now, where students might be turned away if maybe their parents have an overdue lunch bill, or it might be, that they get some sort of special lunch that's not hot, crazy stuff like that was going on. And so inside of that policy, even though it wasn't a federal mandate, the state, the Office of Child Nutrition felt it was really important, and us as a nutrition advisory council felt it was super important to implement that type of a policy in our state policy. So, and the same goes to, we knew that maybe the current administration might try to weaken some of the federal mandates through USDA. So we worked to put a clause in there that if anything was, weakened on a federal level, that the Office of Child Nutrition would review it and make decision on that before they would make it policy. We wouldn't just accept it as that's being it. So that's just a personal thing. I know there's been other policies that those things have happened and that have been strengthened. And, LSIC is one of those things, because not every state has a local school improvement council or anything like it. There are only a handful of states that do. So that's one of those things our state felt was important, to put some type of a governance system in place for individual schools. All right, we're going to talk about the county level now. And again, if you have any questions about anything I'm saying, or maybe I'm talking too fast, tell me to slow down. But I'm going to just keep on rolling. So on the county level, you have at the top, you have your 5 elected, not appointed, elected Board of Education members. They are also staggered. So in my county right now, we have 2 spots available. In 2 years, there'll be 3 spots that kind of come up for elections. So it's staggered, so not all 5 members are elected at the same time. And then the Board of Education, those elected members hire their county superintendent. So they are in essence above the county superintendent. They actually, and backing up to the state level, and it's the same on the county, the Board of Education, state and county, are the ones that actually approve any policy. So the state board approves the West Virginia Department of Education policies. They have their state board meeting, they go through and run through it. They ask a lot of questions. I've been there in person, or I've listened on YouTube, because they always do it live on YouTube, their state board meetings. And I've been through a lot of conversations and debate about policies. I've actually spoken during delegations, brought students to speak and parents to speak during delegations. It's a fun time. But they listen and they do make educated decisions. So, and it's supposed to be like that on the county level as well. So the superintendent, they have associate superintendents just like at the state level. And then they have also department heads or coordinators, whatever it's called in your county. And those people are the same people like on the state level. They take a state policy, a state education policy, and they develop their own. And again, just like the state can kind of make a stronger policy on their level, the county can take a state policy and strengthen it, depending on what it is. They just have to make sure that they follow the mandated language and the minimum that the state has provided them in that policy. So one of the policies that I can think of that's kind of left up to the counties to strengthen or just kind of leave as a template is your wellness policy. So there's wellness councils in every county that meet every quarter. And so they could add things to their wellness policy that are relevant to their county needs. So if they wanted to make, all schools have a, certain curriculum or certain like program in every, say, I'm going to go with Cabell just because, again, I'm there. They could do that in their wellness policy, or they wanted to, hire, they wanted to make room to hire actually coordinators for wellness councils or whatever, they can kind of change it and tweak it however they want. The county, the superintendent, usually they have an executive and or a leadership team that helps develop these policies. They also help develop other things, and we're going to talk about that as well, like the strategic plan, and I'm going to tell you what that is. So again, just to recap, they develop county policy based on state policy. Policies can be stronger as long as they follow the minimum of the state policy. County policies are to include a stakeholder input as well. So they are supposed to listen to teachers, listen to service personnel, whoever that policy is relevant to. Sometimes they create committees out of that. Cabell County, for example, created a committee to work on their charter school policy, which was just approved last night. And they were looking at ways to strengthen that and stay neutral, so it protected everybody all around, protected students, protected teachers, and whatnot. The policies, and that was something I didn't cover in state, all policies, state and county, are up for 30-day public comment. Now, that's something people don't realize and they don't know. That is the best way to have a voice, whether it's a state policy or a county policy. If you go to the state website and you look under the State Board of Education tab, there it says policies. Okay, so if you click on policies, and this is the state level, wvde.gov. I don't know. I'll have to figure it out. I'll give you the right link in a little bit. You click on policies and it'll tell you which ones are up for comment. You click on that, you fill out a little form, and you can tell them how you feel. You can tell them, why you think a section of a policy would not work, or why it is weak, what needs to be added. And I, again, if you ever want a policy workshop done, I can I have a section on how to even write a strong public comment. But that is on the state and the county level. So on the county level, there should be a section in your county website that says policies, and if you click on that, it should lead you to the policies that are up in your county. Now, I think many people don't pay any attention to the county policy issue, and there's not much communication or notification that I know of where either state or county tells you that those policies are up for comment, unless it's a big policy like the charter policy or whatever, where news media will cover it, and then they sometimes will give a link or tell you how to do that. But just know that every policy that comes through that is up for passage, whether it's the state level, Department of Ed level, the Board of Education level, or the county level, all has to be approved. And all has that 30-day public comment period. Sometimes it's actually extended. The charter school policy and the I think accountability policy were both extended for 60 days for public comment. All right, now we're down to the school level. So the school level, of course, you can guess who's in charge. That would be your school principal. They have an assistant principal, or sometimes assistant principals, plural, which is awesome. One usually takes care of one thing and one takes care of another thing, which is wonderful. And in theory, I think every school should have at least two assistant principals. Then you have your teachers. They are the queen and kings of their classroom domains, right? So they have a lot to, even though they have to follow the policies and follow what the principal says they want their school environment and things like that to look at or to be like, the teachers, should have some say in what, of course, their classroom looks like, and those extra things that they can do for the students, as long as they're following the policies, right? And then you have service personnel. I like to call these members the eyes and ears of the school, who really can make impact on students, aside from teachers. I've heard so many stories over the years of how service personnel just, they're the first. If you're a bus driver, you're the first person that sees a kid, a student, for the day, and then sometimes the last school person to see them, as they're on their way home. So, a lot of, I think you all are the foundation of the school. If, teachers and you all work together, I think can only help counselors, school counselors, or social workers, whoever, because you do see a lot and hear a lot that maybe teachers don't, necessarily see or hear in the classroom, because there's so many people around. Support staff, of course, nurses and counselors and all of that, social workers, psychologists, all of you all. I mean, such a great purpose and role in the school. We need more of you. I am an advocate for social workers in every school, not traveling social workers, not traveling counselors, not traveling anybody. We need nurses. We need no traveling nurses. We need a nurse in every school. We need all of you. And I will tell you personally, my daughter had a health issue, and her doctor didn't catch, but a school nurse caught. And I am very thankful for that. So yes, nurses in all schools, full time. And then of course we have the parents, my focus group. You all, you play a key role in the school, and making sure that you're not only your personal child sometimes, but other children, have what they need, and you're also kind of the eyes and ears that maybe some of the staff doesn't, know about or see, and can also, let people know, teachers, observations and things like that maybe they can kind of check on anonymously and so on. So very much appreciative of you all, and of course volunteers. Schools would be lost without volunteers, right? And and I know typically it's in elementary, there's more volunteers in elementary than there are middle school or high school, but I say with LSICs, let's change that a little bit, and we'll get to that. We talk about family engagement a lot, and I think that it's time to really dive into that and what that means, especially with COVID-19. And the distance learning, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that relationship in a little bit as well. And then the VIPs, who are they? They're the students. So students, we're all here for them, right? So no matter who you are in those roles above the students, we're here for them. So that's who I always look at as the VIPs. I feel like they should have a voice when you're talking about policies and things like that, because sometimes things don't sound like a policy, but really you're talking about policy. Sometimes you're not talking about a policy, but you're talking about a practice in how the school interprets a county policy and what it's going to look like for their school community. And some, discipline's a big one that comes to mind when it comes to things like that. And then, of course, the community stakeholders, people that maybe don't have children in school. They aren't staff, but they are certainly valuable members that can support, volunteer. A lot of these community people mean businesses that can partner with schools and bring funding and activities and whatnot. Not necessarily even a business, but an organization that's in your community. And that is, really the makeup of who is in your school and who plays important roles. And I feel like none of those roles override the other. I mean, except for in function and logistics, of course, but they're all very much the same in importance. And what does that mean, and what does that lead us to? Well, the LSIC. So all of these members we see here are part of the LSIC, and that's why it's so important. So on the school level, when you talk about policy, you talk about practice, LSICs and some of these people involved might be making up what the school handbook looks like that parents get on the first day of school. They can have internal school policies as per county guidelines. That's what I was meaning by practice over policy. So maybe there's a way that an LSIC or these folks, faculty senate, has discussed, and this following, like using this type of practice would help their students most, because they know their school community better than even the county would know their school community, right? It's kind of like a family. And I said faculty senate because faculty senate works in tandem with the LSIC, and we're going to get to that. But faculty senate is your, your teachers, and typically, principals aren't even necessarily involved except to be reported out to by the faculty senate. So it's really about staff. A principal will have a leadership team, and that might look different, in one school to the next. But it really, the leadership team from the schools are supposed to be working with the county leadership teams. And I'll get to why in a minute. And then I mentioned before, there should be a wellness counselor team, in the school. Like, I know some LSIC, part of their agenda in the report is that the wellness coordinator of the school will report out to all of these things tied into wellness activities and events, and staff changes and policy changes and things like that. And then, of course, your parent groups of volunteers, very key, whether you're making copies or you're part of a parent group or not, because it really doesn't matter. If you're involved and engaged in your child's school, that's in any capacity, it's great, and we need more of you. And we're going to talk about that too, whether it's in a physical capacity or a home capacity, like what we're going through now. We're going to have to look different about what volunteers, what that's going to look like for volunteers in schools in the coming months. So strategic plan for improvement. So that is a big thing. And so that is, I'm going to go on and change the screen. Whoops, hold on. No, I'm not. I lied. Strategic plan, every school has to develop a strategic plan, and that strategic plan, and we're going to talk about that too in a little bit, is developed by both the LSIC and the faculty senate leadership team. It's a team effort. It is what your guide is, each school's guide is for looking at ways, okay, well, maybe we have this group of students or first graders or whatever that we need to kind of change up the curriculum because it's not cutting, the mustard right now, and we really need to help these students. Or maybe you talk about we have a few students that are at risk with, and keep getting disciplined, and we need to find the root cause, and we need to talk about what we can do. Like maybe there's some incentives or things that we can do to reach out to parents better. So a lot of those things roll into the strategic plan for improvement. So you've learned about all these different levels of policy. Everybody's making policy and decisions. So you have the federal level, you have the state level, the county level, and the school level. But, who is in charge of that? And, and this is a big question I like to ask in person because people make guesses and it takes a while. But the point is, and if you're training someone on LSICs or the hierarchy of public education, kind of give them a moment to think about it, really absorb it. Who is in charge? Well, bam, it's us, right? So we are whether you're a teacher, service personnel, parent, community member, whoever you are, we're kind of tasked. State has an oversight procedure and accountability and support, which we're going to talk about, but really when it's down to that bottom school level, if there's any people that are kind of enforcing and watching the policies, it's us as people, watching what the county approves or doesn't approve or talks about, even when it comes to the budget, right? So we need to be very vigilant, and I will say, especially right now, as we're, talking about funds that might be coming to the county through the CARE Act and the stimulus package, and they can spend it on all kinds of things for COVID-19 assistance. I think just about the only thing they can't spend it on is actual facility improvements, which makes sense to me. But they can, they can use it to help feed kids if that's an issue in your county. They can help by technology for students to have that one-on-one experience. They can use it for staff changes and different things like that. So right now, as county board meetings have never stopped, and they're still going on, and LSIC meetings should still be going on. I mean, be it they're virtual, but and we're going to talk about that too. But those decisions, it's not time for us to stop. It's watching or paying attention. It's time for us now to kind of like really watch and see what's being discussed on that county level. So with that being said, we're going to talk about LSIC. So where in the world is the LSIC policy? And I want to remind you still, you can ask questions at any time. Pipe in. I'm here to answer. The West Virginia Department of Ed, their policy on LSIC is now nestled into 2322. I think it was a brilliant move, and I'm going to give kudos to Charlene Coburn, who is a department head for West Virginia Department of Education. This was her idea. And she thought, you know, people aren't paying attention to this floating LSIC policy. Let's stick it into something that's got some teeth. And that was accountability, because that's what LSIC is about on the school level, is accountability. You can find it also in West Virginia legislation code under Code 18, which means education, and it's under 5A2. Now, we're going to talk about this too, is there are a lot of LSIC policies and instruction kind of scattered in other policies, and we're gonna, you know, I have some examples, but how to run an LSIC and operate it and all those kind of rules are going to be under either West Virginia Department of Education Policy 2322 or West Virginia Legislation Code 185A2. All right. So this is kind of a look at 2322. This is something that one of our state board members had requested of the Department of Ed to put together, because they thought, well, I'd like to see the overall structure, kind of like a cheat sheet on who is kind of like overseeing different things when you talk about the hierarchy. So it's kind of set up like I call it one of those thermometers that you used to have that you put on your head, and it like got into orange if you had a fever. I'm probably dating myself. They probably don't even make those anymore. But anyway, all of these materials I'm going to send to you all in a packet if you want them, and I'm going to tell you how to do that or how to request that at the end of this. But it kind of really gives a great rundown of our accountability system, which starts at the, you know, that's the West Virginia Balanced Scorecard that kind of determines if a school is performing academically, and it also it talks about the balanced scorecard, talks about English language performance, math, English language arts, mathematics progress, attendance, behavior, the 4/5 year graduation, on track to graduation, post-secondary achievement, and English learner progress. And there are indicators, and I'm not going to go through all this right now, but this is kind of an overall look at our system. So I talked about strategic plan, and the West Virginia State Board and Department of Ed have their own strategic plan. One of the things that they did, and they put this together last year, and I personally, I love how they laid it out. They took note of a lot of things that are important that maybe weren't considered before. And one of those things is number 7, which is family and community partnerships and engagement. So they have actually required in the new policy 2322 that each county has a policy on family engagement and community engagement, which wasn't there before. Some counties may have had it, but this is a requirement now. So the state strategic plan, then there's a county strategic plan. And the definition of a strategic plan, just so you know what I'm talking about, is the strategic plan, whether it's state down to the school, is the planning process for counties and schools, and it's designed to focus the essential work of the cycle of continuous improvement around key areas of needs. This process is made meaningful through the analysis of relevant data and the inclusion of stakeholders, that would be us, including teachers, parents, and the community. Established goals are reevaluated and revised yearly as needs changed and progress is made. There used to be like a 5-year strategic plan, but now everything's done on a yearly basis. So this is another, I'm just showing you another handout you'll be receiving. It's kind of a cheat sheet on the hierarchy of education and what it looks like. So I was going to stop here and ask for questions, but again, I don't see any questions. I can go really in depth in all of this stuff that I've already talked about, but for time's sake, we'll just keep rolling and moving on. But again, anytime you have a question, just pipe right in. And there's my email, and I'm going to remind you at the end of this training, but if you want to receive all of the handouts I'm showing you on these slides today, you can email me at janderson@ourfuturewv.org, and I will be happy to send them to you. Or you can drop your email in the posts below. All right, so how do we make your schoolhouse rock? I love that. To show these images because, again, I'm dating myself. That was my favorite thing when I was growing up, that and Sesame Street. So the local school improvement councils, that's how you do it. Right now, if you were training someone else, you might want to stop and say, take in some feedback and say, like, what is your LSIC been doing? This is where I got a lot of feedback in person, and people, were very liberal in their thoughts and information about how their LSIC was or was not effectively operating, which was great feedback that I was able to share with Department of Ed, and they used that, and they used public comments that were made to add some really good things into the new policy. Okay, so the first thing, and so there is no confusion. There is a big difference between parent groups and LSICs. They each have a different role. And this is not by all means, because I don't want to offend parent groups, because that is the last thing I want to do. I was a PTO president myself, and I know how key it is, but just knowing that it's a different role, both important to the school, to make the school keep rolling on and doing a good job. But parent groups, typically, they consist of parents, teachers, and school principal. They have executive meetings that are closed. General meetings are open to the public. I said republic. I sound like Star Wars or the pledge. So, like your officers will meet behind closed doors with the principal and the teachers that are selected or whatever, and then and it looks different. There's a difference between PTO and PTA, big difference. So, but I'm not going to go into that because that's not our role today. But either way, parent groups are to encourage parent involvement in their individual child's life, education, class, and school, provide feedback, suggestions for school programs, coordinates programs and projects that will support or enrich the curriculum, encourages funds that are increased to expose students to things like technology. They provide feedback and assistance, like doing surveys and things like that, on safety and security. They organize fundraiser efforts. Some schools would not even, survive without funds that parent groups have brought in. So really very important role in the school. They also support educational goals of the school and assist with attaining those goals through parent and community volunteerism. So volunteer is important. LSICs, they are a more formal group, and we're going to talk about that. And I'm not going to read anything on, well, I'll go in a little bit, but they are a voting governing member of 3 parents, 3 teachers, 2 service personnel, a required bus driver. It's part of those 2 service personnel. 3 at-large community business leaders, not just business leaders, but it can be community organizations or just individuals from the community as well. One has to be a business leader. The school principal or designate. And I'm going to take out that designate part because there's a new policy change, so I'm going to go into. So I'm going to leave it at the school principal. All meetings are open to the public. All LSIC meetings are open to the public. That's very, very important to know. and I'm going to go over the actual policy part, but there shouldn't be any closed door LSIC meetings. You should always post them and make sure that people know about them. There's no halfway. They set policies regarding school progress, which is part of that strategic plan, and other things we'll get into. They stay aware of legislation and political issues that may impact education at the schools or the county level. The LSIC efforts are supported by legislation, which provides a waiver process by which councils may propose to change local and/or state board policies, and we'll go into that too. So we see it's more of a governing body, and there's a certain way to run them. And PTOs and PTAs, I know PTAs have, like, they go by Robert's rules, but and LSICs do too. Some PTOs do, but sometimes PTOs or parent groups aren't structured that way. But that is kind of like, in a nutshell, the overall differences. Now, and I will say, PTA, a lot of PTA members, I have a couple of friends that are, awesome advocates that go to legislation in DC and advocate for things like family engagement centers and other policies. And you might see a state policy that comes down sometimes through your West Virginia PTA, but I didn't list those things, but those are also things that a PTA will do, because they are very much structured and national and have been around for a long, long time. Okay, so LSIC facts. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty about the policy. After I met with Department of Ed and policy was formed, I went back afterwards and gave them more feedback. And so they have upgraded a lot of the information that was on their website. One of the things I'm going to keep advocating for, which seems like a simple fix, is we need an LSIC button on the front of the Department of Ed page. Right now, you can find it under support and accountability. There's a tab at the top when you go onto the Department of Ed site, but there's a link right here I put up. And they have some great, these are fact sheets they have. And I'm going to just kind of read through them, because this is really the meat and potatoes of the policy. So, West Virginia legislation mandated that public schools establish councils to collaborate with administrators and faculty to promote innovations and improvements in the teaching and learning environment in the schools. LSICs are designed, gosh, I can't read today, are designed to represent the voice of the community's education stakeholders. That's everybody. It's not just one group or another, it's everybody. What authority does the local school improvement council have? A lot, actually. They may propose alternatives to the operation of the school that will meet or exceed the high quality standards established by the State Board of Education, increase administrative efficiency, enhance the delivery of instructional programs or materials, promote community involvement in the local school system, or improve the educational performance of the school generally. So basically everything, right? So they can suggest things through a waiver process, or sometimes it doesn't have to be a waiver process. They vote on these issues. It's not one person's idea that says something and they just go with it. It's very much formal. And it can go outside of county or state education policy. So if something might not work for your school, we hear a lot about, magnet schools and programs like that wanting to come in, like arts and STEM and eSTEM or whatever. Or maybe there's a discipline program that's research-based that you heard about from an out-of-state resource, and maybe it kind of isn't exactly in West Virginia code or policy, but that is something, as long as it's research based, and you can show, your LSIC can show that it's relevant and it will help students' success, improve the school overall. That is something that could be approved. I don't know many waivers that are not approved by county or the state. And the state superintendent's office has to report on these waivers to LOCIA, which I mentioned in the beginning, the oversight committee at legislation level, on these waivers. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But how do local school improvement councils work? Local school improvement councils serve as an integral part of school governance through shared decision-making. The membership is designed to draw upon the expertise and insight of stakeholders from various backgrounds to define the strengths and weaknesses of a school and to develop solutions to improve education of the school. The LSIC is responsible for addressing complex issues and fostering changes that may drastically alter the curriculum, instruction, or administration of the school. Local school improvement councils should critically examine their school's needs and develop comprehensive improvement plans. That's part of that is the strategic plan. The LSIC efforts are supported by legislation which provides a waiver process I mentioned, by which councils may propose changes to those local and state policies. And how do you become a member of the local school improvement council? So the principal will arrange for LSIC member elections to be held prior to September 5th. And I'm going to reiterate that in a minute. And this is September 5th of each school year, and we'll give notice of the elections at least 1 week prior to the elections being held. To the extent practicable, all elections to select council members shall be held within the same week. Now, I'm going to go into how that happens, how that works, and who gets elected and who gets appointed. I understand that right now a lot of you have been not elected in there. You've been voluntold in some cases, or maybe you just said, hey, I want to be a member, and they just said, okay. Because when you're talking about parents, sometimes you might have a school that has a very, very small amount of parent involvement. And so it's easier for a principal to do that. But I'm telling you right now, stop that. Just stop, because I will get to that, why some best practices and some things to help you make sure that you follow that policy. But I feel like if we continue to not follow the actual policy, we're still watering it down, and it's not going to be as effective. So we're going to get into the membership. So your voting membership is you have your principal. Now they are an ex officio. So where the state board members that are ex officio, you know, this member principal has a vote. And so, and I'll get to that, while they're not necessarily the person at the front of the room holding the meetings, well, not necessarily, they just aren't. They do have a vote. There are 3 teachers. They're elected by their faculty senate of the school. New in policy this year, one of those teachers has to be someone that represents the social, emotional needs of students. I think that's very important and critical, especially coming out of this. I think we're going to see a new level of trauma from teachers, parents, and students. So I really like that addition. 2 service personnel folks are elected by the service personnel employed at the school. One must be a bus operator who transports the students of that school. Now, I hear a lot about where, you know, bus drivers aren't able to attend meetings, and we'll probably talk about that too. So when you're making your meetings, if you can't get that bus driver there in person, because transportation might be a really key thing you're discussing, make sure that there's something in your bylaws, which we're going to talk about too, that really notifies them and gives them the opportunity to, if they can't be physically present, somehow be able to, like, you know, get that information and be a critical voting member. All right, the other voting membership are 3 parents, guardians, or custodian members. They are elected by the parent-teacher organization. Okay, this is a really big, this was an issue. This has always been an issue. And I mentioned it in the very beginning. All parents that have a child at the school are eligible to be members, not just the parent group members. The only reason that the PTOs, PTAs, or whatever parent group you have are the ones that are holding the election is because it was a broader, you know, in theory, you have a broader reach of parents. So it doesn't mean that just the members of that parent group are to be nominated and elected. I want to make that very, very, very clear. There's been controversy everywhere I go. And I that's one of my goals in legislation, to change that language, just to add one more line. That one line that I added, all parents that have a child in school are eligible, not just parent group members, something, because it is confusing. I get it. If there is no parent organization that exists, then parent members are elected by the parents of the school in a manner determined by the principal. So especially middle school and high school, unless you may have a boosters group that's a parent group, or an alumni group. I don't know what it looks like, but you're not likely going to have necessarily a PT or PTA, although some do. So the principal would designate that. Now, this is really important. Once you all decide how you do this, it needs to be put in bylaws. And we're going to get to the bylaws and all that juicy stuff. Okay, next are the 3 at-large members. They are appointed by the principal. They're not elected. You have at least one who represents business or industry, usually your school business partner, which is already in place, pretty much, or not. It's a way to reach out to new partners because they feel very, involved and committed once they're asked to be a part of something like an LSIC. One should be at least someone that resides in the school attendance area, and then none of these people should be eligible for membership under any other categories. For example, say I'm a parent, but I have a business. If I couldn't be an LSIC member because it's kind of like a conflict of interest. Now, if you are a vocational technical school or comprehensive, they call them, school, you get up to 4 additional members appointed by the principal. So the categories would be someone to represent an employer in that area or community, an employer-sponsored training program. So maybe you have, someone that, like, I can think in Cabell County, Chris Miller, Dutch Miller, had this great program where they worked with the schools to employ students and work with them. And they trained them. So once they got out of high school, they had a job. Also an apprenticeship program, which is a little different, or you want someone from post-secondary education. So those are your 4 categories if your school is a vocational technical school or comprehensive school. Other than that, you've got those 12 members. And then the last category, which is super important, is the student body president, or students, which are, again, the VIPs. So 7th grade and higher, you can have a voting member student or 2 students that represent the student body. So now that doesn't mean, and I'm going to get to like other members that might be under here, it doesn't mean that like an elementary school or a school that has 6th graders or whatever can't have them as members of the LSIC that come in and talk to the adults, and they get in, feedback or input from them, but they would not be voting members. So the only students that could be a voting member would be your 7th grade and higher, as per policy. I see a question from Rebecca. She wants to know, can a parent group officer also hold an LSIC seat? My response to that is there's nothing in policy right now that says they can't. Especially when you're talking about schools that may only have a limited amount of parent involvement, although I would recommend that it wasn't that way, because there's a muddying of the water between, like I said, parent groups and LSICs. So I'm not saying you can't, I'm just saying because policy does not dictate that you can't. But if you're trying to involve more parents and someone serving both those roles, I mean, why not really make an effort to reach out and find someone else that might be willing to serve that other role or purpose? Hope that answered that, Rebecca. All right, so, and with that being said, so non-voting members, policy dictates the voting membership of the LSIC, but nothing prohibits expanding the membership of LSICs to include non-voting members or to request other stakeholders to participate in the meetings of the LSIC. So when I see that and think about that, I think, okay, well, you might want to invite the school nurse to be a member. Now, they wouldn't have a vote, but they could be a member that would attend all those meetings. So they would be on the roster with just non-voting beside their name. a school counselor, a social worker. Think of all those members or all those really key stakeholders that aren't necessarily mentioned in the, the formal voting roster, but would be very valuable to your LSIC. I think, like I mentioned before, our wellness coordinator, not our wellness, but an elementary school that I attend their LSIC meetings here in Cabell County, they always have a wellness report from their wellness coordinator. She's, there every meeting, and it's very helpful. All right. Okay, assistant principal. This is new this year. This is something I kind of advocated for myself or against or whatever, however you want to look at it. We heard a lot of feedback where principals weren't attending the meetings. They just didn't feel like it was necessary, so they would send their assistant principal. So now policy specifically says, and I've listed this section there, assistant principals, although they can attend the LSIC meetings, they may not serve as a voting member of the or chair of the LSIC. Their role is not listed. That's fine if the principal's there and the assistant principal's there, but they should not by any means, neither one of them, be at the front of the room leading a meeting, because it's just that's a lot of why that meeting was not running efficiently. And it's no offense or no shade to administration, but we all know, I mean, whether it's work, in another type of a situation or wherever you are, it just kind of creates this almost like this fear sometimes of speaking up. So that was kind of the purpose of not putting administration in that lead role. Although they present, I've worked really well this year with my my daughter's assistant principal, and she's, we've worked really well together, and she's done presentations and that have helped everybody understand things like balanced scorecard, or we do Khan Academy. So she did a presentation on that, and it's been so very helpful. So, and, help me with, agendas, because I don't know everything that's going on inside the school. So she's played a really great supportive role for me because I'm an LSIC chair at a high school. And how the membership terms work is parents, teachers, and service personnel. So like the elected members, they serve 2 years, and their elections are staggered too. So it's very much based on how a county meeting would be set up, like a board meeting. All other members, like your community at large or whatever, and the students would be a 1-year term. Now it doesn't mean they can only serve 1 term. It's just they have to be appointed again officially. Or you bring on new people for the ex officio roles, and that doesn't include the principal. Obviously, if they're principal, they're an ex officio no matter what. But yeah, so parents, teachers, and service personnel, you get 2 years. It's going to take a while to kind of make that system work, because we're kind of like, one delegate that I work with that's a very big supporter and advocate of the LSICs. He keeps telling me, Jenny, we're in our infancy, be patient or whatever. So I know it's going to not be an overnight thing. Asking to have staggered elections, it's going to kind of be a little wobbly at first. School principal responsibilities. I mentioned before, they are in charge of setting the prior to September 15th meeting each school year, giving that 1 week notice prior to the election. All elections held within the same week. So that's their policy instruction. The first meeting is called the organizational meeting. It must happen no later than October 1st. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. It is mandated in policy. Notify each member by written or electronic means at least 5 days in advance of this meeting. The LSIC elects a chair out of this first organizational meeting and 2 members, your LSIC chair assistants or whatever you want to call them. Some people say LSIC president. They call their second assistant a secretary, and then there may be a treasurer or somebody, or whatever. But those roles really, really, really need to be defined in your bylaws, which again, we're going to get to. But they assist the chair in setting the agenda for each meeting. And then the last thing for principals, they are to provide a copy of the current policy for LSIC I mean, especially this coming year, whether we go virtual or not, whatever school looks like, they need to provide the new policy because it's changed a lot. It's not even in the same place. Any state board rule or regulation promulgated pursuant to the operation of these councils. So again, legislation changes, which you'll get in the new policy. Any information as may be developed by the Department of Education on the operation and powers of local school improvement councils and their important role in improving students' school performance and progress. So basically what you really need to do, what you really need to look at is doing a little training at this first organizational meeting. And this is kind of a little handout. I just wanted to show you. It kind of like talks about the school principal needing to be the ambassador. Some of the old policy and paperwork that I found, I dug around and found, you know, the principal's role is to promote and maintain a safe and effective learning environment for all. It is the principal's responsibility to elevate the importance of the voice of the LSIC. It's supposed to be used as a vital resource for connecting the school to families in the larger community. It is a vessel to activate and develop community partnerships and resources that support student learning and success. To connect students, families, and staff to expanded learning opportunities and training. So I'm a big advocate whenever teachers are in a room learning about mental health first aid or discipline, restorative discipline, or things like that, you know, these things might help them at home with their own children. And I think the LSIC is a place that you could actually do those trainings together. And why not? Because it would only build those relationships between teachers and parents. It's a lot of stuff, y'all. Okay, so your LSIC chair, once they're elected out of that organizational meeting, they serve for 1 year. Now they can be elected again for another term. There is no like term limit for an LSIC chair. So, but they have to be elected back in, or a new person comes forward and is elected. If a chair's position becomes vacant, the principal shall call a meeting, special meeting, to elect another qualified person to serve the unexpired term. It may be one of your second chairs, hopefully it would be, that would step into that role. The principal of the school shall not serve as the chair. Very, very important. That's why I keep saying they're not supposed to be the people at the beginning or at the front of the room for all your regular LSIC meetings. Their only role is that first organizational meeting, and they put it together and hold that election. That is their function for that. And I went over this, filling a vacancy, elected member, like if a parent or teacher, service personnel has to drop out, the chair of the council, that, you know, which would be the LSIC chair, shall appoint another qualified person to serve the unexpired term of the person being replaced. Appointed member, the principal would be in charge of replacing that person as soon as practicable. General operations. So how many times do they meet, right? So an LSIC meets at least once every 9 weeks, or equivalent to the grading period. So 4, we call them quarter meetings. And the chair is the one that calls these meetings by petition of 3/4 of its members. And that's mainly because there's a lot of times you vote on things. We had a virtual one not too long ago, and we voted on an issue, had to table something till the fall. So, and we had that 3/4 of our members on Zoom. The county superintendent shall monitor principals to ensure all LSIC meetings occur as outlined by policy 2322. So, so once again, you know, that county superintendent, you know, needs to like either designate a person in the county from their executive team or whatever that kind of makes sure that all of these policies are being followed in every school, not just 1 or 2. All meetings of the LSIC must be open to the public in compliance with the provisions of the Open Governmental Proceedings Act. So if you didn't know that, because a lot of people didn't, now you know. I need that thing, that rainbow thing with the star, the more you know. Like I said before, all of the LSIC meetings must be public meetings. They are not to be behind closed doors. PTOs and PTAs can do that with their executive board, but not LSICs. Something like that happened recently I won't speak about, but I was not a happy camper, and it is not appropriate. You cannot, bring those teeny stakeholders and not invite the public into that environment. Each LSIC shall adopt a set of bylaws or meeting procedures. The West Virginia WVDE, Department of Ed, provides resources and technical assistance for conducting effective LSIC meetings, which a lot of this, if you get that, if you request that handout packet or whatever, I'm going to include the Department of Ed's handouts in there too. I'm using their slides. They have a PowerPoint you can use if you're training your LSIC, which is wonderful. I have a lot of extra stuff in my training, but I'm going to send whatever you need me to send. Each LSIC should hold at least one meeting annually. Now, this is a fifth. Well, it's actually 6, because your organizational meeting is meeting number 1. Then you have your 4 plus your organizational meeting. Okay, so you have your organization meeting, your quarter meetings, and then you have a 6th meeting. All right, and this is a town hall. So the way it's in the definition, and it's been here for a while, but nobody knew about it, and I didn't know about it. I asked Charlene Coburn and Alexander Kreiner at Department of Ed. I said, "What's the difference between this section and having all your meetings public?" And so we broke it down, and so lo and behold, there is a town hall LSIC meeting that is supposed to be happening in every school. So this is an opportunity for attendees to make specific suggestions on how to address issues which are seen to affect the school's academic performance. This meeting has to be announced 10 days in advance. So your regular LSIC meetings are 5 days in advance. This special town hall, again, your 6th meeting, doesn't, it really depends on your progress in your strategic plan, when you want to have it. If you want to have it out the gate in the first quarter, you could, plus a regular quarter meeting, or you want to have it in the middle or the end of the school year. Maybe you're looking towards what your new strategic plan is going to look like. I don't know. It's really just depends on the school. The issues that are talked about at this meeting might be parent and community involvement, the learning environment, student engagement, attendance, supports for at-risk students, curricular offerings, resources, the capacity for school improvement in general. So they have this nice little town hall sheet that's brand spanking new. I'm really happy with, because it really breaks down the the section of the policy they didn't have this resource before. So I really love this. This is something, all of these materials, I feel very strongly should be handed out to parents the first day of school, when everybody gets all of those resources, and we all read it as a parent that first day of school. And we know our students might not bring home stuff all the time. If this LSIC information went out that first day of school, it would be a beautiful thing, and it would inform a lot of people and get them more involved in the LSICs. So I really like it. I'm going to look at this town hall sheet. So it says, why is this meeting necessary? Because it will really do a broader reach, or to engage the parents, students, employees, business partners, and other interested parties in a positive and interactive dialogue regarding the school's academic performance and standing, determined by the measures adopted by the WVBE, the Board of Education. So I look at this as, back in the spring, a little over a year ago, when Department of Ed had to kind of scramble around because legislation asked them, to put something together. And they were actually, when something big like this comes up in legislation, there's like a policy, a state code that actually requires Department of Ed to do stakeholder meetings. But if the LSICs had been working properly, then they would have had a lot of data and a lot of information about what was going on in their schools and how people felt about a lot of those issues that they asked of people in their online survey and those face-to-face regional meetings. So I think a lot more people could have been involved and offered up, input. That would have been a great time to have an LSIC town hall, for that matter. So every school community was heard, and they advertised those forums and got people to attend them as well. This is kind of what, this was from my own LSIC town hall that was a high school town hall. And just to kind of show you what you can do with it. We did ours where we broke up, we had discussion tables based on questions, like, what do you want to see for curriculum additions, no matter if you're a student, parent, teacher, service personnel, whatever, community. We had a table talking about safety of the school, those really important topics. And then what would you like to see facility improvement wise or upgrades? So what could help improve the balanced scorecard? It was really just kind of open-ended, but we had the groups rotated, so everybody got to visit each question or table discussion. We had someone leading the discussion and capturing it on those big post-it note things that I love so much, and markers. And then we put that together at the end of the meeting. We kind of like took out the commonalities, what was, the things that really stuck out that people really wanted to add. And these things were added like to our strategic plan when it was all said and done. So you can see how we kind of did it, each group, what they talked about. And then at the bottom, I listed the commonalities that came out of that. It was really helpful in directing what people wanted, the stakeholders all wanted to see for that high school. And I tell you, because of the students, because I have a section on my agenda, and we'll talk about agenda, but for students, and one of the things that they were bothered by were bathroom safety issues, and it happened to be something that both schools out of the town hall came about, and the superintendent made good on it because they were made aware, the school administration were made aware, the county was made aware, and they added an extra staff person for the end of the year to help with those bathroom issues, monitoring them and make sure students were safe. So a lot of good things can come out of these LSICs. I put up questions again. If anyone has any questions, ask away. I don't see any new questions, so I'm going to keep rolling right on along. I mentioned that the LSIC policy, some of it is like put in other policies that you may not know about. I know when I went and spoke with Department of Ed, I think they're working on trying to like pull all those policies into one place, so they're easily found. One of those policies is 4373, which is the policy that it's known as discipline, basically. It's the expected behavior policy for schools and safe and supportive schools. So out of that policy, there are a few sections that involve the LSIC directly. But if you didn't know where to look, you wouldn't know that that's how it goes. So I'm gonna like go over a couple of those things. So like what we're seeing now, one of those things is that LSICs are supposed to look at the discipline report of their school, and that's how they kind of determine. They can actually look at individual cases, of course, redacted information. It can't, it has to be within those guidelines of HIPAA and all that sort of thing, privacy. But they can look at like certain cases of at-risk students that just are disciplined over and over again, like, and really look at those root causes, what's going on, and how can we as an LSIC vote on something that's going to really make a difference and keep these students in school, keep them, get them motivated, or reach their families. What can we do as an LSIC? And even getting public feedback on that to really help, whether it's, an individual case or just overall in the school or grade level or whatever. So it really plays a really important role. And I don't think, I can't say it enough, what a powerful, positive thing that an LSIC could do in making not just, a whole group of students, like just that one student that might have been teetering on, dropping out or whatever, and the LSIC make a change that really kept them in school and saw them through graduation. So like, I think this is 4373, right? The other thing in 4373 that stuck out to me was it has mandates for creating a crisis prevention and response plan. So what's going on right now? This would have been a very, very good opportunity if LSICs, again, were working appropriately and effectively. They could have created their own school crisis response for COVID-19. And, whether it was talking about how are we going to distribute, we need to have something in place to distribute food, make sure all our kids are fed. We need to have an assessment type of a system to keep checking on what our school needs are, if family situations have changed or whatnot. So, and then how are our teachers going to be able to educate our kids if they're out of school for an extended period of time? So I look at it as kind of a missed opportunity in the past few months. But the crisis prevention and response plan, that's a school thing where the faculty senate leadership teams and the LSICs can work together on that school plan, and then they take that to the county level. So the county level also has a crisis prevention and response plan that they work on. So wouldn't it have been lovely if all of these LSICs would have worked together on a crisis plan? And then the counties could have worked together, or the county worked together with these LSICs and had something kind of like at least a skeleton plan in place before COVID-19 happened. So, and not preaching to anybody, because I'm telling you, I know not, LSICs have no idea that they're supposed to do this. The other relevant policy that stands out is 2326. Let me make sure I have this number right. 3236. 3236 is all about innovation. So it talks about LSIC's responsibility and authority over, like, if a school wanted to become an innovation zone type of a school, or a magnet type school, any of that stuff. So they have a lot to say about that. It has to be a voted issue out of LSIC. And I don't know that a lot of people know that. Maybe they do, but this policy 3236 talks all about that. These things will be provided in that packet if you want to get a hold of that packet. I hope you do. That goes on to talk about that too. Additional policies. This is one that actually is new. It came out of House Bill 4319. I actually just found it recently. It's supposed to go in effect June 2nd. Anyway, it actually talks about Economic Development Act of 1985 and the West Virginia Guaranteed Workforce Program, Summer Youth Intern Pilot Program. So it asks LSICs to come up with and complement the delivery of programs in the workforce preparation and provide a framework for schools, school systems, and communities. So a lot of that I would imagine would be something that would be relevant to your CTE schools, because CTE schools, I had a conference a couple of years ago, and CTE school had no idea they were supposed to have an LSIC. So they are, and again, they get extra members. They get 4 extra members that I went through a while ago, but local school improvement councils can play a key role in implementation of programs at the age-appropriate grade levels by engaging the school business and community partners, including 2-year and 4-year institutions of higher education, to help develop within students an awareness of the changing world of work and the appreciation of the relevancy of the academic subject matter for success in various occupations and in entrepreneurship. This may include, but not limited to, presentation by guest speakers, demonstrations, hands-on creative projects, virtual or on-site visits to workplaces, and internships, externships, and crediting appropriate for the grade levels of the school to reinforce the competencies students will need for success. Local school improvement councils may exercise their authority pursuant to 185A3 of this code to seek waivers from rules, policies, interpretations, and statutes for plan implementation. So that's huge for CTE schools. And I think even for, as we look at maybe bringing middle schools, expanding CTE programming to middle schools, I would include that in that LSIC middle school role. Again, questions. I don't see any, although I did see a message pop up. And I'm slow about answering these, so I might have to answer it later. So I'm going to keep rolling on. We're going to talk about the LSIC agenda. So like I said, the LSICs are actually, I have this book on my shelf. They are supposed to go by what's called Robert's Rules. It's a, Robert's Rules. There's a book, Robert's Rules of Orders. You can find like an abbreviated version, and then there's a thicker version. I think this one I got on Amazon.com for like $5. Make sure your LSIC has it on hand. It tells you all about how to run a meeting. If you're not familiar with Robert's Rules, that formal meeting operation. And one of those pieces is having an agenda. So your agenda, your packet, if you desire to get the packet from me, will have a sample agenda, something you can, like a template, you can fill in the blanks for your meetings. And I also included one of my personal agendas from our LSIC meeting at the high school. So you can look over that and learn how to do that. I also listed some resources that you'll be able to link to that talk about Robert's Rules, breaks it down, and things like that. But I really cannot emphasize when you're doing an agenda, you want to make space for delegations, people to kind of if they are attending the meeting, whether it be virtual or in person. And I think that's a good thing to do, is offer both of those. I really encourage people to do Facebook Live LSIC meetings, even if you're not in the middle of COVID-19, because it really helps reach a lot more people that may not be able to get there in person. I also feel it's a very important thing to add, especially middle school, high school. Do it in elementary school if you want, but a place for students to give a report and talk about issues that are important to them. Some LSICs don't include, so I would say, I will go as far as saying as most LSICs do not include students on their agenda or give them that space to talk. And I don't know why you would not, because like I said, they've made an impact in our school, which I'm very appreciative of. So the LSIC agenda should include research-based strategies. So if you're talking about changes, you've looked at your strategic plan for improving the school and student success, what it's going to look like. Anything you come up with that you might want to do a waiver on or a change should be research-based strategies, and not just air popcorn ideas or whatever. And I'm going to go over some best practices, and that would include you as an LSIC member doing a little homework on some of these things that you bring to the table. Like, you can come up with the ideas, but then you have to have that homework for the next meeting, or maybe in between, to get back to your members to say, yeah, I looked this up, this state's doing this great job on this whatever, and then bring it back to the table and put it on the agenda. You all should be utilizing data. I think of it as an opportunity for dream data. We heard a lot about homelessness, students and grand families the past year, and not anybody really knowing how many for real of those families were out there, or those individual students that were kind of in transition, going from couch to couch or whatever, because homeless is defined as just not a permanent home. So it doesn't mean they're living on the streets necessarily, although there are. But that would be an opportunity, your LSIC, to form a committee under that. And we'll talk about committees, but a way to form some sort of really meaningful look at data, and that data to be handed to Department of Ed or your county when they need that. Because last year they were kind of scrambling around trying to figure out those numbers, and even why kids are being pulled out of the school system. How beautiful would it be if your LSIC developed like an exit interview or strategy? I've mentioned it to Dr. Payne last year. I mentioned it to the Education Committee and Senate last year. I really feel that's a key thing to start asking parents as they pull their kids out of school. Why? Because they're going to tell you, and we've got to stop blaming it on truancy and things like that, because that's what the county level looks at. They think that parents are pulling kids out of school because of that, when we know there's a lot of reasons. But the LSIC can look at that. They can look at that data, they can analyze it, and use it to figure out ways to prevent that from happening. And then encourage collaboration. Again, that goes back to including students on your agenda and places for everybody to have a voice, including the public that might be at that meeting, whether it be virtually or in person. Council operations, you know, the LSIC, the main need of it is continuously monitor progress. So what your LSIC issues look like at the first part of the year are not going to be the same thing at the end of the year. You're going to gather that background information, like I said, that data and things like that. You're going to provide access to expertise. So maybe you bring a social worker as a guest speaker into one of your LSICs to talk about strategies and ways to keep students in the schools and help families, engage families. Attend to both verbal and nonverbal communication. So you might have some emails that come through, you know, that you get from people, stakeholders, that you need to make sure that you know, respond and communicate, as well as, you know, in those actual meetings. Establish short and long-term goals, which is all about the strategic plan. You might have like a first quarter goal for your school, second quarter, third quarter, until the end of the school, and then you analyze how you did at the end. And that was the function of those county meetings that we're going to talk about that were happening, which really wasn't a good, effective use of them, because those things weren't necessarily talked about in depth. You're supposed to create a positive and productive agenda. Of course, all of these things would be productive, right? So I think it's important not to just like fluff it up and have people talking. You need to have that two-way dialogue going, not just someone presenting all the time. And then developing an understanding of the role of each member. And that goes to, I believe, the next section. Well, I talked about doing your homework. So if you have an idea or you hear something at a meeting that you're not sure, or nobody can answer, then do your own homework and research. Talk to stakeholders. Don't just limit your talking and your dialogue to the LSIC members. Talk to community members outside of the LSIC, because that's going to really bring them into that world and be, you know, give input that you might not know. I feel perspective is everything. And a teacher that's an LSIC voting member might have a conversation with a parent that's not a part of LSIC that really brings some insight into the LSIC that's helpful in developing some of those plans. So don't limit yourself to just talking to the LSIC members as you're doing your homework. Put the interests of the school first. When it says school, I see students. I don't see the word school. I see the word students. And be willing to listen. Again, that goes back to listen to your members during that meeting, and also listen to those outside stakeholders. Attend to others while they are voicing their opinions. Make sure you ask questions and comments that are helpful. And stick to the issues and items on the agenda. Sometimes that's very, very hard to do, but it's very doable, because you just simply say, you know what, sometimes you have to create something like a bike rack and say, okay, we have a loaded agenda, and I want everyone to hold their questions till the end of the meeting and then get to them, you know, so you can stay on track if you have one of those fully loaded agendas, because you want to try to keep those meetings to about an hour. A bike rack just means, again, I'm going to have like a big Post-it or a smart board. I'm going to write you know, if you have a question, put it on a Post-it note. We'll stick it up on that board. That's kind of a best practice. All right. Very, very important. Every LSIC, and it says it in policy, has to have a set of bylaws they establish. Now, I know a lot of you probably don't, and that's okay right now. You're gonna do this in the fall, right? So your bylaws is what kind of establishes those things, like how the voting is going to happen. It establishes the roles of each person. So one of the things, like, I added to each one of my members, like, because we didn't have bylaws, by the way, was when you're talking about parents, you need to like include something like, you know, your role as a parent is going to be that you're going to be an ambassador to other parents of the LSIC. You as teachers, you're going to be ambassadors of the LSIC to the other teachers and staff in your school, and so on and so on. And then it's really important to establish the roles of your LSIC chair, what they will be doing, their job descriptions, as well as those two helpers, your second and third LSIC, or if you want to describe them in your bylaws as a secretary that takes notes, because you've got to take notes. It's Robert's rules. You take notes, you post minutes, just like you would any other board meeting. This was described to me last year by the advisory council. I called it a board of education of the school once, and I kind of got slapped on my hand, but I'm going to say it anyway because that's what it is. You're elected members or appointed members, just like a board of education. So you, in essence, are the board of education of your school. You're going to, like I said, you're going to make rules for voting, participation, anything else that you want to put in here. Like you can include the policy pieces about tenure, how long a member can be a member. Like like I said, teachers, parents, service personnel is 2 years. How long your chair is going to be there, and then accountability, very, very important. The accountability piece, and that just says, okay, we're going to post our agenda 5 days in advance or 2 days in advance, whatever that is. We're going to post our minutes this many days after we have our meeting. And we're going to post it here. We're going to post it on our social media page. We're going to post it to the to the county page, whatever those rules are, because those aren't necessarily mandated except to say you are to use the broadest reach to get to the public to show transparency and accountability. You'll have you might have an outline of what the agendas look like for your LSIC meeting in your bylaws. You might have a section for the orientation session will be held at the first meeting of the school year for all council members. That includes information and council roles, responsibilities. So in essence, you've got a piece in there for training your new members that are coming in. Amendments. So maybe you vote on something and then you all kind of meet again and you decide to amend it. So you would have a policy piece in there about what the procedure is on that. So a lot of things, a lot of good things can come from it, but a lot of things need to be discussed. Caitlin, hi Caitlin. Yes, I am recording it and I will send the URL. And I'm going to be repeating this live a couple times too. All right, best practices. So there's things that are mandated. There's things that are recommended. Working with Department of Ed, and going to those trainings throughout the state, I did come up with some best practices, and the Department of Ed came up with some best practices. Some of them were already there on the website. But it was kind of hard to find LSIC before you had to Google West Virginia LSIC. So it was a little difficult to find information, but we're going to kind of go through some of these best practices really quick. As I see, I only have 10 more minutes, but there's so much to discuss. So some of the best practices would be becoming familiar with your school, visit the school during the school day, attend school functions and events, talk with staff and students. Like I said, don't just limit your conversations to your LSIC members. Learn the ropes, learn about the basics of parliamentary procedure. Again, you can get that Robert's Rules stuff down and either buy the book or there's a link on one of my handout sheets that has it broken down really in basics. And then do your homework, like it said on that previous slide. Request some materials before the day of the meeting, which your chair should be providing you an agenda before the meeting, and read anything that's going to be discussed in case you have to be the vote comes down to it and it has to be approved. Vote in as an informed manner. So again, it's like if you're kind of like the board of education of your school, this is really important that you plan ahead so the council members can do their homework. Learn how to inform other LSIC members. Find out how to add something to the agenda, which in most cases I mean, that would be something you'd put in your bylaws, but it would be contact your LSIC chair. It's important that schools put their LSIC chair's contact information out there. I will tell you that a lot of people I've trained, when they went back and asked principals or asked counties about where can they find their list of the LSIC members, they had the impression that they were not to give that information out, that it was private. And no, it is not private. If you sign up to be an LSIC member, everything's public, and it should be. It should be something that's easily accessed so those members can be contacted, just like a Board of Education. You know, although policy doesn't say that per se, that is just, to me, if you're talking about accountability and transparency and how to run an effective council, that is something that really needs to be done. And make sure that you attend those LSIC meetings regularly. Make sure that as a member you're there, because they need you 3/4 of you there to make a vote. And then also as a non-voting member, if you're just a member of a public, be informed. Bring your student with you. I mean, that's a great way to bond with your child, like hear all these things going on that are discussed, or even maybe speaking themselves. It would be a way for your student to develop some public speaking skills or whatnot. But it would also be a way to bond, and you go home and discuss these issues that maybe you didn't know, or maybe, you know, find more information out from your student that you're not aware of, you know, that things are happening at your school. I'm going to go back to these best practice sheets because I think there's some stuff on here that I'd like to go over really quick. So one of the things that I think is important is, you know, again, it's just like if you are on a board, you're representing the constituents. So as you're talking to stakeholders outside of the LSIC membership, you should be really representing what their wishes are, not your personal interest. You know, that's not what the LSIC is for. It can't just be because, you know, your personal child, you know, wanted something, is mad about something, or you're mad about something. It really needs to be something that's going to affect the whole school as a body. If it's your personal child that's experiencing something, that's a whole different ballgame. That's something you go to your teachers, you go to the right channels, to your principal. Now, if this is something that involves multiple students, you know, that's a different thing. That's something that the LSIC should definitely be aware of and help with. I don't know if that makes sense. A lot of this stuff I've gone under. So problem solving process, we'll go over that a little bit. Establishing priorities. So again, by listening to the constituents, by listening to each other as members, you do a needs assessment, and those things are analyzed and reported. The improvement team should be setting priorities by ranking needs according to what must be accomplished. That goes back to that town meeting slide I showed, where we collected all of that information from so many people, and that was what was used as our guide to create that strategic plan. So that's really super important. You know, make sure that you create a time frame for improvement efforts. So, and kind of like monitor that. Like I said, something that you decide on at the first part of the year may look different the middle or the end of the year. So you want to set some little goals for your LSIC to accomplish, or your school in general as you go along. And you know, plus it makes you feel good. It makes it look like you did do something great as an LSIC, right? But I want to leave that here as far as best practices, but, and, you know, again, you'll get those papers in your packet. Some of these things, you know, like I said, again, thoroughly train your LSIC every year. County-wide communication, so everyone knows what an LSIC is before the elections. Like I said, you can get those Department of Ed handouts and put them in the packets to go home the first day of school. That's a great way to inform people about the LSIC. 2 county board meetings, all schools. So that was just a suggestion that kind of came out of all the training. There's a slide on here, and I'll just go on and say it. So one of the changes in legislation was that The only schools that had to go to their Board of Education on the county level and meet were low-performing schools, and we'll go over what that looks like. But best practice would be, because it's not mandated, is that the counties still meet with all their LSICs. I mean, why would they want to stop that? I know some may have, but I think for the most part, they continue doing that. And going further into best practice, maybe you meet with your county in the beginning of the year and then at the end of the year too. If your school system is doing a CEFP meeting, the Comprehensive Education Facilities Planning, you want to try to include your LSIC chairs and members if you can. So typically they'll create a steering committee. So you want to make sure that your LSIC chairs or somebody representing your LSIC voting team nominates themselves or asks to be a part of that steering committee team that's going to talk about what your facilities are going to look like in the next 10 to 30 years or whatever. It's very, very important. And the last thing on this I would say is, again, I mentioned doing a Facebook Live every time you have an LSIC meeting. I use a hashtag to, that way people can like click on that and see all the meetings or see like all the ideas or agendas or whatever that's come up. So my statewide hashtag is WVLSIC Network, and it's been really helpful for people to share ideas. Again, add non-voting members to your LSIC. That would include school counselors and social workers. Make sure you hype up your forum town hall. Make sure that you form LSIC committees under your LSIC membership. That is in the best practice category. You put that in your bylaws that you are going to do that. So maybe you have a team, a committee working on discipline issues. Maybe you have a team working on, better transportation or family engagement. Maybe you have something a team working on beautification or something like that, although that kind of falls more on the PTO or PTA side. But my point is you can have specific committees and they would just report to the whole LSIC at each meeting. It's a good way to delegate some work so the LSIC chair isn't like carrying all that, or the members aren't, and you could bring in other members of the public that don't vote into those committees. It's not just those voting members that would be a part of that committee. It's a good way. You could have a data committee or something. I think of all kinds of ways that would work. I'm going to skip the questions again. Potential of the LSIC. I like to think of it as there's no limit to the potential of the LSIC. And I like this quote, "Don't tell me the sky is the limit when there are footprints on the moon." So again, some of the things, the activities that LSICs can do are propose alternatives and promotion to innovation, request waivers of the rules and policies of county and state board. They can appeal to LOCIA. So say their idea, their waiver gets turned down by the county, they can go to the state and appeal to them. And that's in the actual policy 2322, and it has all of these bells and whistles about LSIC. I haven't gone over every nook and cranny, but that's where you would find it. There are the rules to that in there, as well as all the other things that I may not have gone over. They can, and then of course they assist with the school in planning a strategic plan, and that goes along with, like I talked about earlier, you have your faculty senate, your leadership team that's in the school, and the LSIC should all be collaborating on that strategic planning, just to capture those different perspectives on what students are experiencing or what teachers are experiencing, service personnel, administration, whatever that is. So it's just a good way to bring everybody together. And that goes to the same thing on the county level. The county level can bring in their LSIC chairs or members to the table. Like right now, I believe the LSIC should be playing a key role in COVID-19 and what school's going to look like in the fall. So on the county level, as those counties are planning all those things, the LSIC should certainly, most certainly, be a part of that, because it almost mandates that they are, right? When you talk about the crisis prevention and response and all those things too, they should definitely be the voice, not reinventing the wheel and I know I won't name a county, but they were going to create this parent advisory council that would meet with the superintendent. And not every school was chosen. It would be a principal picking a parent to do this and go to the superintendent. So it really, like, it was an exclusive group, and it wasn't including everybody. I don't recommend that. I don't know why people always try to reinvent the wheel and come up with new ways to try to get feedback when the LSICs are already in place. They're mandated, and it involves the public and the voting members of the LSIC. That is structured so well. So that's, yeah, I'm a big advocate for not creating new groups when you have the LSICs already there. So what kind of dream data and collection and committees could you create? Anything you want. I mean, like I said, you could talk about like food data, like, assessing like the food system in your school community. And like I said, some of those kids that are at risk, you might have a gathering. You might have a lot of parents of special needs or disabilities children that want to be a part of that LSIC, and maybe a parent's not an official member, but one of those voting members can create that committee under that, and you all create, like, you can create support groups out of this. You can create groups that create initiatives and incentives for like the lower performing students in your school. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do by collecting data and committees. Talking about waivers, like I've said all the way through here, this is the golden nugget for LSICs, where they can create that waiver that exceeds county or state policy. So what that looks like, you can download these off of the Department of Ed site, and I'll also include it in the electronic packet. But there are instructions for the procedures for requesting the waivers. You'll see right here. I'm not going to go through all of them because it really just kind of talks about those categories I've already mentioned, about improving administrative efficiency, curriculum, family engagement, all those things. It can create an innovation zone throughout this waiver process, jobs for students, whatever your community needs. There's an application process. There's one application for LSICs, as you can see on this. It has to be a vote through the LSIC. I mean, there's no way around that. So it's important that you attend those meetings as members, and you all vote appropriately. The LSIC chair has to sign off on this, and then it goes to the county, your Board of Education, to get approved or not approved. And so that kind of is a segue into the last part of this, which is the relationship between the Board of Education and the LSIC. Now, we talked about, and these sheets, I'm going to give them to you because it kind of helps you understand what the County Board of Education does. I'm not going to go over it now, but it's very helpful. It's a nice cheat sheet. But as I said before, right now, the only requirement as far as you all as an LSIC going to the county is if you are a low-performing school. What makes it what you're supposed to discuss as a low-performing school is, you're going to plan that meeting on the county level at least 30 days prior. And the county is actually responsible for creating that agenda, as well as letting you know 30 days in advance. And the LSICs are supposed to be discussed, and it's supposed to be the LSIC chairs that are running all of these LSIC meetings, including the county meeting. The principal could present, like our county did, part principal presentation and part LSIC chair, but the LSIC chairs are the voice of the LSIC. They are the speaker for the LSIC in general. But they are to provide information, comments, and suggestions that the council wishes to bring up to the attention of the County Board of Education. You might have a major issue to discuss, a beef about something going on in your school or county, and that is the opportunity to do that, as long as it's going to be, relevant to improving students' success and achievement, and improving the school in general. So with that being said, who are the people to contact when you're talking about this? Because this is the thing. Although it doesn't say it in the policy, the best practice is don't wait till the Board of Education asks you to come to them. They have a direct role with you, especially in this new accountability policy 2322. You need to be contacting them directly as an LSIC, not just for one day out of the year, all throughout the school year. So what I mean is, like, even for like your meetings, they should want to come to your school LSIC meeting and hear about what's happening in that particular school community. So they could see the actual facilities. They can see and hear from the community, the students, the parents, the teachers, the service personnel, principal, community members. If you can't get them to come to all or one of those meetings, then please get them, reach out to them and make an invite through email or call them, however you can get their contact information, and invite them at least to that town hall meeting. We had really great success in Cabell County with getting different board members. Not all of them came, but 2 or 3 came to each one of the town hall meetings that the schools held, for the most part, not all. But it was very helpful, and they asked questions. They said, wanted to make sure that they were going to get all the information collected at the meeting, sent to them. They were very cordial, and they were very, very helpful. And I think it was in part because they were invited, because LSIC chairs or whoever reached out to them, that more things got done, and questions were asked. And this is the thing, and no shade on superintendents, but the superintendent roles, they're the secretary of the county board. So sometimes things just don't get to that county board, the county elected board members. They just don't. And it's not anything necessarily, superintendent might just, their priorities are not necessarily the same, or there's just so much to talk about. So if you ask your Board of Education members, your elected Board of Education, to attend those LSICs, they're going to know, like when they get things to pass, if they get a waiver, they're going to know exactly. They're going to have a more educated, reason to make a decision on any of those things that you bring to them as an LSIC. So the other person I would say to reach out to make your LSICs more efficient is if your county has a communications director, or whoever controls the social media and the websites and all that. Might be somebody in IT, it just depends. Reach out to them and say, hey, can we do something that's going to streamline and make sure that all our schools are getting our agendas posted on the county websites through social media, that they're, that everybody has the chair's contact information in case someone needs to contact them. And I know that's just work for them every year, because an LSIC chair may change every year because of the election process, but it's so important. It's so important to let these families, to let the county, to let the community know who to reach out to in case they want to know more information about what's going on in the school and the LSIC, and make sure that there's a county calendar that has all these LSICs. Really kind of mandate on that county level, because the Department of Ed, while they didn't mandate some of this stuff, you could certainly, in your county LSIC policy, advocate for those things to be mandated. So there is a great system of accountability and transparency, and all these agendas, minutes, information is out there. And I would say even go as far as okay, well, maybe you make it a policy in the county that every time a policy changes, a state policy comes down the pike, or a county is making a policy, like the charter school policy in recent, months or whatever, that that information is sent by someone, the communications director, IT person, whoever it is, someone designated on the county level, that they send the LSIC chair that information, because then they can disseminate that information to their LSIC as well as the public, the school community, because a lot of those things affect them. If the CEFP planning and things, anything that comes from the county, if LSIC chairs were part of their job was to disseminate information, I think you would reach a lot more people. You would get a lot more interest, and it wouldn't be people shocked when we lose our librarians in our county, or a football field is being discussed or whatever, and it makes it to the county level. One thing that Michelle Blatt, who's an associate superintendent at Department of Ed, we joke, we need a t-shirt that says, take it to your LSIC before you take it to Facebook. Same thing, take it to LSIC before it reaches that county level, because you're going to get more done efficiently, especially if you're inviting those board members into those LSIC meetings instead of waiting until it elevates to that county level. So although, like I said, it's not mandated, it's very key to the communication and the process of the LSIC to make sure that those county board members are well informed. We're almost done, folks. Okay, and I will say, as far as family engagement goes, because that is my my main job out there in the world, is to engage parents and families. If you're anyone other than a parent in the school system, just know that some parents and families don't want to get involved because there are a lot of stereotypes, types, and misconceptions from the parent perspective by other parents. So it may be a thing of where when they were younger or and they were going to school, maybe they had a bad experience, so they're afraid to get involved in things like your LSIC or whatever. So really try to work hard at ending those stigmatisms, like put some information out, welcome them into it. Every time a school secretary sees a parent come in the school or talks to them on the phone, they, hey, did you know our LSIC meeting's coming up or whatever, and explain to them what it is, because chances are there's an issue there that they haven't, felt like they were comfortable in talking at. And the more more LSICs get out there and people know about them, I think so many issues are going to be solved, including the issue of family engagement. I think you're going to see more families get involved or engaged in their child's school. So if they think they have a voice, they'll come. It's not about food anymore. It used to be you could provide food at a meeting and people would come. But and on that other hand too, I would suggest if there's a way that your county could work with you, or even LSIC is charged with creating those business and community partnerships. Maybe there's a church that's willing to go pick up parents that don't have transportation to get to those physical LSIC meetings, to be a part of them, or ones that can just do it by their phone by watching Facebook. Most everybody has a phone. They may not have internet, and they may not have access to certain things, but they probably have a phone, although some don't. But that, just really think out of the box and being creative on how to engage families, because I really believe, like I said, it's number 7 on our state strategic plan, right? We want, everybody wants, Department of Ed wants, our counties want, or we all say we want family engagement. Our schools want more families involved. Our teachers need our families. And I will go on and say, one of the positive things that has come out of COVID-19, especially when you're talking about elementary schools, are because parents have been communicating more with the teachers, I see this really big strengthening in relationship building between parents and teachers. And I don't want to lose that now. I hope you don't want to lose that either. I hope that this would be something that could help build on that, because I've talked to several teachers and parents over the last couple of days, and everyone agrees there's got to be a great effort at orientation and educating parents on what school's going to look like in the fall. So getting your LSICs on board with that and helping them to create, or having the LSICs be a key role in creating what that looks like, that orientation and education. Because I would say parents at this point need to be educated on teachers, on how they make a planning session. How do they go from we're teaching you this today, to how it builds up to what they're going to learn at the end of the week. Parents will love to hear about that stuff. They want to know more about what your job is. They respect you. You respect them a little more. I mean, I think everybody respects everybody, has given each other grace. And we've all had to dive in and do stuff that we shouldn't have had to done, but we did it anyway. And we did it, with, great effort and admiration for each other, I think. So yeah. That's just my little, Medea slide. I added direct communication between a school board and the LSIC is best practice. I think everyone should do that. They would love to most times I would imagine they would love to be invited to come to the school. I think sometimes they're standoffish about just showing up at a school, but if you invite them to come to an LSIC meeting, I think that's golden. I think it's very helpful. The other thing I would say, well, same thing. It's like I said, have them visit, do a tour, offer them a tour of the facility, show them what needs a little TLC, Each LSIC sends the BOE minutes and contact information every time after a meeting would be helpful. And like I said, work together with your Board of Education all year, not just for one meeting. These are just examples of what we've done with Cabell Midlands LSIC. We created a page to put all that information on. The school official, their official page shares the information as well. It's on our electronic board outside. I've seen a lot of that in Cabell County this year since more awareness has gone on. Yeah, and you can just, like I said, you post all that information up there, and it really, people see it, and it gets them more engaged in the LSIC. County, the same way. There's been some news stories that have advertised the town halls, and the Cabell County site has put up the information about meetings. And so I think the more that we see, the better as well. But you've got to make an effort to do it. You've got to contact the county and advocate for that to be, inside of the LSIC policy in the county itself, because if, people think they have to do it, they're going to do it. If it's just a suggestion, they probably aren't going to do it, at least streamlined all the way around. This is just a little slide on, again, the parent connection. I'm not going to go through it, but I have a little exercise I do with training sometimes when I'm trying to get parents and teachers on the same page. Is, they say not to assume, but I always say assume. Assume if you're a teacher and you're talking to a parent that they have had a bad day, that they're a parent, they have the best intentions, that they're attempting to improve their child's school experience, that and all these things. And then it flips. If you're a parent and you're talking to a teacher, assume the teacher's had a bad day. Assume they don't know anything about your daily routine and struggles. Assume that they want to help your child just like you do with the best intention. And assume they don't know the policy that relates to your issue, if there is one at all. And assume that you both want to just help each other. That's just my little golden nugget of advice. So my challenge, and this is like the last couple of slides, my challenge for all of you today is, how can you, if you're a teacher or you're a principal, how can you engage more families into the LSIC? If you're a parent or, you're a community member, how can you get involved, and how can you start those communications and those dialogues with your teachers and your service personnel and your principal and all that? I think it works both ways. Really work hard on that this summer. Work hard on that, because ask your county superintendent, email them and ask them what's going on with LSICs. Make sure that they're still, giving guidance on them meeting, rather, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic. Our county has, made an effort to do virtual LSIC fourth quarter meetings, which is one of my last slides. This will be included. It's kind of some guidelines, on how to do an agenda that's based on a virtual agenda or a virtual meeting. And maybe some of the things that you could be discussing right now included crisis planning and COVID-19. I also included some instructions for Zoom. If you're a parent that's an LSIC chair and you've never used Zoom or any type of a platform like that, there's instructions on that. And some little tips, like one of the things that I learned because we were the guinea pig, the pilot for this at the high school, and we did Zoom. We used the county Zoom to do it, the county account, so we couldn't Facebook Live, so that was one strike. But we rebroadcast it, and I stayed on there live like I'm doing now and asked questions and stuff and got them to the administration if it was an administration, question or whatnot. But also, when you're voting live or virtually, make sure everybody that comes on there that voices something, make sure they introduce themselves every time they talk. And then if you're taking a vote, make sure it's a roll call vote, that you know who is voting. Don't ask them to just raise their hand or whatever. Pretend that it's an audio meeting only. That's the safe rule to do it, because although I was looking at a screen that could see everybody's face, and we were doing a shared screen to put up the agenda and some of the presentation stuff, and the stuff we were voting on, When you rewatched it, you couldn't see who was actually there at the meeting. You only saw the shared screen. So that was a lesson learned. So I added some of these little tips to the sheet, and hopefully they will help you if you do it. I would advocate for some summer virtual LSIC meetings and some planning of, like I said, some parent orientation, and some planning on what your school is going to look like and need from volunteers, because that's going to look way, way different. If we're like in a hybrid situation where part of the students are being virtually educated and part is in person. And think about what community buildings and other organizations, churches, or whatever that the school might be able to partner with to use as facilities to educate kids if that comes to that. And we have no idea at this point. The last thing I would like to request from you all, I have a post training survey, and I will put this in the comments, the link. But it would be really helpful to see how I did, and then get some information from you on what your LSIC, what they've been doing or not doing, and how we could help. I also am asking for people, if they have some successes from their LSIC, to share them with me. So we can create some models going forward and some best practices that have actually been done and not just talked about. West Virginia Department of Ed would love to hear some of that too, and they're looking for ways to, like, if we can find some models to really highlight you all that are doing a great job. Your LSICs, kind of like, take a look, let's walk through an LSIC meeting. This is what it looks like. This is why you should be involved, that sort of thing. Some little videos. They had some old ones, but we need some fresh new ones. Other than that, that is my training, my virtual training. I will do this a couple more times live and answer questions, but this will be recorded. It will be on YouTube. It will be here. You can rewatch on Facebook. But I hope that you've learned some stuff. If you have any questions after this, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm going to go through everywhere I shared this and see if anyone had questions that I might have missed, and get back with you. If you want all these training materials and handouts, I will send them to you electronically. You can email me at janderson at ourfuturewv.org. Or you could just drop your email in here in the comments section, and I will get those to you. You are welcome to tweak any of these handouts, not the Department of Ed's, but the handouts I've given you that says Families Leading Change, Our Future West Virginia. You're welcome to tweak them. You'll get templates for the bylaws and the agendas, and a lot of really good information. It's a lot. I know it's a lot. That's what drives me crazy, that this policy is so important and so key to helping our students, and it doesn't get the dignity and respect that it should. And now that it's in 2322 about accountability and support, I hope that it does. I hope that this grows, and I hope that my friend that is a House delegate that supports it and calls this the infancy, I hope he's right. I hope that it grows, and I hope we can improve on things as we go along. So if you have any ideas, shoot them to me, let me know. And I want to thank you for joining me. And I wanted to tell everybody tomorrow night, the regular WV Ed Talks, we have Autumn Williamson coming back from, she's with the Marshall University social worker program, a student, and she did a great presentation on discipline, restorative discipline and justice the other morning on Saturday, and we just kind of tried it out at a weird time, but she's going to be back and do that presentation again and take questions live. And so it's a good thing, and it kind of rolls into and relates to some of the things LSIC could be actually working on for students. So it's good stuff. I was impressed. So thank you very much, and I will see everybody Thursday if you tune in. If not, like I said, just shoot me any questions or emails, and I will get to it as fast as I can. Thank you.